Welcome. We're back in session with your host Jay of What's Going On, a Social Studies Network podcast. Now let's get into it. Hey everyone, welcome back to What's Going On, a Social Studies Network podcast with your host Jay. This is our first episode of the new year, so happy new year to everyone. And I know we're going back to our daily routines from being on break, so I hope everyone's mental health and I hope everyone's physical health and emotional health is doing great right now, just transitioning into the new year and transitioning back to what we were doing before break and before going to sleep late, waking up late, and just being off schedule. So today we are with Miss Tina, as I like to call her. So tell us a little bit about yourself. You are very decorated and you are amazing.
Thank you. That is so kind of you. It is an honor and privilege to be here with you and your audience. My name is Tina Franklin-Bertrand. I am a Chicago public school educator at Boucher International School. We're located in the heart of the South Shore community. I've been teaching at Boucher for 23 years, and prior to that, I have 10 years experience in the private sector.
Okay, and from that, the first question that I always like to ask people is, what did you think social studies was versus what do you think now? So before you went into education, what did you think of social studies versus what do you think of it now from your decorated career?
Well, thank you. That's so kind of you. I think my earliest experiences with regard to social studies was that it had life and breadth and depth. And I attribute that to my parents. They were very strong proponents of oral history and the preservation of family history. So they often talked about how their families migrated to Chicago from different places. They would take us around the city and point out things like the Soul Man statue in Bronzeville that represents all of the people who migrated to Chicago from different places in search of a better life. They were voracious readers, and so reading and sharing things about their personal lives and our family history were things that brought social studies to life.
Yes.
And then when I went to elementary school, my teachers lived in the community where I went to school. So I could walk past their house, I could see them at the grocery store. So they were real people telling me about real things from a variety of perspectives. I think perspective is everything when it comes to social studies and history. One person's account might be different from the next.
Yeah.
So hence the reason to encourage students to consider viable resources when they're studying. In high school, I had wonderful teachers who wanted you to go to museums and see artifacts and talk about the meaning of those things, make connections between the perspectives that people have. It's one thing to read about the Korean War or the Vietnam War. It's another thing to talk with someone who was there, who experienced it, who might take you beyond the pages of a book and add life to a document, or recant the sounds and the smells of what they did when they served our country and what it meant to them. Many people who've served in the military have a family lineage of that. So it really makes things come to life. And as a teacher, I would say that I try to do the same. And in my role as a primary years program coordinator, I try to help teachers find resources, maybe above and beyond what they have immediate access to, so that they can broaden the scope of knowledge that they're trying to impart with their students.
I think you brought up very important factors to what makes up social studies. Putting life into social studies, different perspectives from other people, and social studies not just being something that's on paper. It's not stagnant, it's real. But also something that was important before I get into all of that, actually that goes into perspective and putting life into social studies, is being able to see the people that teach you in your own communities. It's so interesting because I don't really think I've had teachers throughout my education that I could go outside and like they live down the street from me or they're my neighbors. Like, be like, hey, Miss So-and-so. It's like sometimes it's so awkward seeing teachers in public. Like, sometimes I'm like, let me just walk away. Let me just pretend like I don't see them. But no, besides that, I think like when it comes to perspective, being able to have that connection, being able to have that sense of community with those that educate you, it makes it so much easier to bring it to life, because sometimes social studies can be boring. And I don't think it's just boring because it's history. I think sometimes it could be boring because it doesn't pique the interest of their students because they can't relate to it. When they look at it, we're teaching them dates, we're teaching them facts, we're teaching them events, but like you said, we're not learning from those who are actually there. When I was in high school, they took us to it was not high school. It was high school and middle school, but an experience that I had in middle school is they took us to the Holocaust Museum, and we actually got to meet survivors. We got to meet two, and there was an incredible story, and I was like super engaged, like asking questions, answering her questions, and you know, it's such a different feeling learning about it, seeing it on screen in a movie or a documentary or reading about it in a book versus learning about it from someone who went through it. Now, granted, they didn't go through the camps. Their parents or her parents were actually able to like send her away, which I thought was just a very interesting perspective. Like you were talking about, there's so many different perspectives, because when we have teachers, there's standards, there are mandates, there are things that sometimes, as educators, we may be afraid. Well, I'm a future educator, but I still consider myself an educator, I gotta put myself there. But, like you said, bring it to life. But when you only have that one perspective, that narrowed in perspective, it can be hard to connect. It can be hard to learn. It can be hard to take what you learn out into your community to make it better. But from that, from her perspective, it wasn't just the fear of being in the camps. It wasn't just the fear of being experimented on. It wasn't just the fear of whether I'm going to go to the gas chambers or whether I'm going to actually take a shower. She was a baby. It was her parent. We felt her parents' fear through her recounts of what they told her. Is our baby going to make it? Is our plan going to fall through or not? And I think that's also important in connection to, you talking about different war stories. My grandpa, he served, but he didn't go through, he almost went through the Vietnam War, because he was talking about to my family at the time, everybody who had a year or more, they took them I can't remember like what the base was called, but they took them to this camp. And at that camp, the only people that were there were those who were going to Vietnam or those who are coming back to Vietnam. And from his perspective, he's coming from the perspective of a black man during racism, his role, as a soldier during this time. His perspective was, dang, am I gonna go to Vietnam? He got lucky, and which is what I'm very grateful for. And then I think he ended up getting sent to London. They took a whole bunch of people, like, it's not enough space for y'all, we need to take y'all somewhere else. And from my perspective, I'm like, wow, like, my grandpa, he made it to meet my grandma, to create my uncle, to create my dad, from my dad to my mom, to create me, to create my brother and my little niece and my nephew. And I think, like, those perspective of, like, it's super important, because you just can't have one perspective to bring everything to life. You need to have a collective, like how we're having this conversation now. And I think that's very beautiful.
It's beautiful. It's empowering. Mm-hmm. It's enlightening. To know somebody's story gives you an insight into who they are. Mm-hmm. As an educator, there's been major emphasis on social emotional learning. Mm-hmm. It's not just the academics, but it's the social well-being. Mm-hmm. As an international school, we promote international mindedness. Mm-hmm. And we have a learner profile trait and attributes for that learner profile. how can someone who is a beacon of change ignite a passion within you? Maybe you read about them, maybe you research them, maybe you walk in their footsteps, maybe you look at their artifacts from history, and then you might make a connection to something that person did, something that inspired them, and you carry the torch a little further.
Definitely. I'm sorry you said carrying the torch, because I was just thinking about, with my perspective and what I learned, and this is a theme that kind of had in my other conversations, is that history is not just a collection of the past, it's who you are in the present to create a better future, right? And I think that is very beautiful that you guys are an international baccalaureate school, because we are building upon, what we're going through now, things such as xenophobia, or even when these terms weren't created, we're consistently building upon it to create something that's better. Like my grandpa's history is now my history, and now I'm taking it and I'm making new history, and I'm talking to you, and we're making history, and being in this space. Like I feel like I'm a part of like a really big thing right now. Like even though it seems so small, because sometimes our view of social studies, our view of history is not international. Is here, is present, is what are we going through, not what we can learn from others, from their language, from their culture, from their experiences, from their history. How do we get together? How do we make new history? But I would love to hear more about the international part of your guys' school. Like how do you incorporate that? Like how does that matter to the way that you guys are contributing to history, and the way that the social studies affects the students, and the way that they're learning about a broad diverse of topics?
I wish that the students were here to answer that question, but I'm going to try to recap on their behalf. When we teach a unit of study, if it's for preschool through 5th, it has a transdisciplinary approach. It will integrate literacy, math, science, social studies, maybe even the arts. For our middle school students, 6th through 8th grade, we use an interdisciplinary approach, where we might have a core subject area. They're departmentalized. Maybe it's individuals and societies, which would be comparable to social studies. And it might integrate itself with mathematics or science or something along those lines. Teachers will ask students some essential questions. What does cultural diversity mean to you? And they may answer from their immediate perspective. The teacher may give them a pathway by sharing some text of a variety of genres, asking them to analyze, synthesize, and interpret the text. Sharing and exchanging ideas in that classroom, but maybe also adding more from a broader scope. So the students may connect the dots. Here's a struggle that someone experienced during this place at this time. And here's something that I experienced, or that my grandparents experienced, or someone in this community experienced, or someone around the world experienced. When they make those connections, they're developing a deeper knowledge of themselves and others around them. It's one thing to say to a kindergartner, let's be friends at school. Let's be friendly and let's make friends. Let's look out for each other. Let's take care of each other. It's another thing in 3rd grade to talk about the relationships between local and broader government. And how we want to live in a democratic society and what that means. But if you were in another country, maybe their government is different. So how might you compare and contrast? You might have some points of commonality, you might have some differences. If you ever travel to that country, the way that you act and react might be different because their government is different. We want students to think outside of what they know. It's a great place to start. But then how can you go further? We invite students to take action in the things that they do. A form of civic engagement. For example, we had a school-wide food drive, and we asked the students, what should we do with the food that we collect? And they said, we'd like to reinvest that food in our community. We'd like to feed the people who need it here. So instead of donating it to a large food collection bank, we want to give it right across the street to the church. that distributes food. We want to add to what they're doing because our families and people in this community can benefit from that.
Right across the street. Okay, you just said a lot right there. And so one thing that I love that you talked about is the way that you integrate other subjects into social studies, because social studies is everything. Social studies is math, social studies is science, social studies is reading, social studies is art. And I think that is so lovely about the fact that we don't box our children in. And something that you said that stuck out to me, they went across the street. While it is so important to, be international, to look outside of our window and beyond that and make sure that our kids' minds are expansive and open-minded, a lot of these kids live across the street. A lot of these kids live down the street from across the street. And that brings me back to like when you were talking about perspective. Like, what perspective do I have if I feel like I can't even give my mom who's across the street or my neighbor that watches me across the street some food? And I just think that with history, like, wow, oh my God, like, I don't know, how you just have like a mind explosion, like, oh my God, like, I don't even know how to say everything that I'm processing right now based off of what you said. But, when we look at history, when we look at our kids, like we on the south side of Chicago, when we look at these kids in a deficit mindset, instead of looking at them and letting them grow, letting them make these decisions. And I love how you also put your kids at the forefront. Like, I wish they were here. I wish they were here too, because, kids are our future. Kids are our social studies. We are raising our kids to be what we want to see, or maybe what we might not see, but that's okay, because they're always contributing to these new ideas that are just mind blowing. Like, literally, I'm just like, across the street, like, I don't know, it's like every generation kids get smarter. Like, I always think, like, was I like this when I was a kid? Sometimes I go to my grandparents and I'm like, was I smart when I was a kid? When I just hear different kids, because not only is social studies supposed to be from the perspective of an educator and the way that we're teaching them, we're learning from them. And I feel like that's another theme that always comes up in my conversations, is that there are teachers as well. And we're learning from them just as much as they're learning from us. And I think that is absolutely lovely when we think of social studies, because it is social. Yeah, dang, wow. Typically, I got so many words to say. Typically, I'm never stumbling my words. And I'm like, today, I'm just like looking at all of your books. I'm just in this space of trying to create greatness for our kids. And I think that's absolutely amazing. But, wow.
It is amazing. It's amazing to see children come to school with a natural curiosity. And a teacher may strategically put a book to read to them. Something that's culturally relevant, something that they can see themselves in, be it in a specific genre or a topic, or even just the tenacity of the human spirit. Once they listen, once they hear that, they may want to revisit that text. They may want to talk about it, draw a picture about it, write about it, respond to it. And in doing so, they're internalizing that. We often say for homework, students, we want you to go home and talk to 1, 2, 3, as many people as you can about what you learned in school today. What did you do? What did you see? What did you experience? And oftentimes they'll come back and they'll tell us what happened when they did that, plus some more. It's that cyclical nature.
Cyclical. Okay.
It's like those concentric circles. You drop a pebble in the water and these ripples kind of spread. Sometimes people are caught in the ripple, sometimes people are caught in the current, and sometimes they drift and sometimes they come back. There's a certain intangible ebb and flow to learn. Social studies is often a vehicle for that. And just like you said, it naturally connects to so many things. We could be teaching about social studies and students need reading skills to read the material. A teacher might impart some knowledge by presenting the information through the written media or multimedia. so that they can connect the images with the ideas or the concepts or the themes. And then as a result of learning that, what would you do?
I think it's so. Are you asking me, or was that just a question?
Just a rhetorical question.
Because I was like, "Who you put me on the spot? I'm supposed to be putting you on the spot as the host." Like, no, but I think like with you talking about internalization and concentric. I'm learning the vocabulary words that I would be putting in my papers. I'm gonna find some way to put it in there. But no, but with internalization, and I'm connecting this to the point that you were making about the multimodal ways that we teach our students within social studies, because you have to think about what you mentioned. Kids might need reading skills, kids might need this, and when we look at our students in particular ways, whether they be children of color on the south side of Chicago, in particular communities, we have to think about the history that has put them in this position for us to internalize certain things. And what I mean by that is we have to think about the history of where did our children of color come from? Where did our Black children in the school come from? We have to think about the fact that, and I'm thinking in terms of my grandma who has a master's degree. Her parents, her dad, had to go and do field work. Her grandparents couldn't even go to school past 4th grade. And we get to be in these spaces where we get to push our kids past that. We get to allow them to think beyond 4th grade. We get to allow them to be special as 4th graders. And I think that is super, super important in the way that we internalize who we are, because when I hear internalization, like I was saying, it's like it feels negative. A lot of times people don't talk about internalization of good things. We internalize bad things. We internalize the way that racism reflects us to society. We internalize the subordination of history and how that affects us now. We internalize the negative statistics about our kids and how they're not graduating and how they're dropping out and this, that, and that, and this. But the fact that we can incorporate other topics through being able to, build upon that history, make it better. Because as, I was talking about with, using the history, using our present to create a better future for our children, that's super important. So that way, the internalization that we have, they don't have to take on that same pressure. And that's not to say that they won't have those pressures. That's not to say that they won't have those struggles. But that is to say that it will be easier on them because they will have something better to build upon that we allow them to have, because your students are only who you allow them to be. And when we look at history, when we look at social studies, when students were only allowed, when Black children, when poor children were only allowed to be 4th graders, not when they were not allowed to be phenomenal. That's just who they were. It's like a snake. You put them in a tank and it's really small, they can't shed their skin to become a bigger snake. But I think that's super important, and I just love that, because social studies is not just something that's on paper. It's not just memorizing facts. It's not just knowing history. It's not just being the smartest person in the room and being able to say, well, I know this about this, this, and this. It's about making sure that we come together as a collective and being able to teach each other.
Absolutely. And I'm inclined to think that students will agree. They enjoy seeing their work on the walls.
Yes.
And talking about what they did, how they did it, the creativity that they innately have. That
innately.
It grows. You feed it and it grows. You ask, you seek to ignite and inspire, and it blooms, and it takes on many different identities. That's international mindedness. That is knowledge of self and your connection to the world around you.
Yes. So not only are you dropping gems and teaching me new words and mind-boggling me, wow, I just feel like I learned so much, because a lot of the times, this is a conversation, and I always say that, like, I don't ever want anyone to feel like, it can't be a conversation. It always has to be like, I'm smarter. I need to learn from you, or you need to learn from me. Well, yes, we need to learn from each other. But I never wanted to be this thing of an intellectual contest, because it is a conversation. Mm-hmm. It is supposed to be something that's comfortable. And with that, do you have any last thoughts that you would like to say?
Again, what an honor and a privilege to see you become the young woman that you are. And sharing your knowledge through this platform that didn't exist in the past. So you're getting the message to the people. You're inviting that dialogue that's important to have. Sometimes there's a gap in this intergenerational change.
Yes.
My gem would be to be a good listener, because the heartbeat of our future lies within our youth.
Wow. And my gem would be to just listen to her. No, my gem, that should be my gem. But my gem would be, wow, I'm the one that created this segment. I should have had something already prepared. Just over here, just being smart and stuff. No, but my gem would be that perspective is important. And we need to make sure that we're catering to each student's perspective, to our perspective, so that way we can come together as a collective and create international mindedness, as we've been learning about. Thank you so much for tuning in back to our first podcast of the new year. And I just want to say thank you so much. I truly admire you, and you are absolutely amazing. And we out. Peace.